the TWRA does a wonderful job, and I know in their vision statement, mission statement, it's having sustainable populations. And just pick one. We got them.
Yeah.
We've got more fish, more creatures, more. I mean, it's just crazy good, the things that we have here. Next year will be 40 years that I moved here, and it was the best thing that I ever did was moving to Tennessee.
The award-winning Tennessee WildCast is on the air with the latest on hunting, fishing, boating, wildlife watching, and all things outdoors. Make welcome your host, drummer and outdoor expert novice, Jason Harmon.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this edition of Tennessee WildCast. We've got a great show for you today, a fun show with Mr. Joey Monteleone. He's with us today. Going to talk fall fishing, hunting, all kinds of fun stuff. Glad to have you.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
And Mr. Don King is going to help co-host today. Glad to have you back.
Sir.
Don?
It's so great to have Joey in the house today, and live and in person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of times we hear him on the radio, WSCM.
I know.
And,
early in the morning, if you get up early enough, you're going to hear him. He and Bill Cody and Charlie.
Yeah.
Talking outdoors every morning.
Yeah.
So, during the week.
Glad to have him in studio and in person.
Man.
This will be fun.
Well, they told me when I started I had the perfect face for radio, and I'm sure. I mean, I've got the voice, so there's no doubt about it.
Oh, man. We've been chatting before the show, and this is going to be a fun one. We've already laughed a lot here, and I hope y'all stay tuned and keep listening, keep watching. It's going to be fun. But I want to touch on fall fishing to get started. Now's the time. I mean, it's fun to fish right now, right?
It is. Spring is really, when you get to 50 degrees, I say that's magical. 50 and rising or stable really works out well. When you get to fall, when it gets to 50, I mean, they know they've got to eat. The days get shorter, and if you can go on a moon phase, which I believe in, not everybody does, but a full or a new moon, it really makes a lot of difference. And they're eating everything that's moving. They're looking for something to eat. They eat a lot of shad because they're the most prevalent food source, but they love crawfish. I call it the Red Bull for bass. I mean, for every 5 pounds of crawfish a bass eats, it gains a pound.
Oh, wow.
There's nothing else even close to that.
Huh.
So we're talking bass right now, but I mean, you could chase crappie and bluegill and all kinds of fun stuff right now.
Yeah, I'm getting ready to write a blog post called "Give the Bass a Break," and it's kind of like going out and catching bluegill and crappie and catfish. And the TWRA does a wonderful job, and I know in their vision statement, mission statement, it's having sustainable populations. And just pick one. We got them.
Yeah.
We've got more fish, more creatures, more. I mean, it's just crazy good, the things that we have here. Next year will be 40 years that I moved here, and it was the best thing that I ever did was moving to Tennessee.
From Missouri,
right. And Missouri's a great state.
It is.
A lot of great hunting and fishing there.
A lot of hunting and fishing. We've got 4 distinct seasons here like they do in Missouri, but here our winters are a little shorter and a little milder. And if you like the outdoors, and I don't care if you want to shoot pictures or shoot deer, Tennessee is a great place to be. I mean,
you can't beat it.
I've been all over the place, and I've never seen anything that comes close to it.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not leaving, and y'all came here, so that's an obvious that it's a place to be.
Yeah, they're gonna have to kick me out. I wouldn't take that off the list.
Well, I'm excited to talk through some baits. So you've got a new book out. There's a lot going on, but let's.
I'm going to hold
Where do you want to
this
start,
thing up.
Don?
Let's start with the book.
Yeah.
I think I've got it on screen here, and this show for our radio listeners is an encouragement to go online or watch your local TV station that might be carrying the show.
Yeah.
So we're going to have some visual stuff here. Joey's book, I'll Be Tennessean Ya. If you know Joey at all, you know that's his catchphrase.
It is.
He'll leave you with that most times.
Yeah, when we first started doing Tennessee Wildside, the TV show,
right?
Because nobody's going to remember Monteleone. I'm lucky if they remember my first name. But when you release a fish, you say, I'll be Tennessean Ya. People thought, well, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I hit on cool, I'm staying with it. So I, when I close my Facebook or even a blog post or, the radio or whatever else, I say, I'll be Tennessean Ya. And it's funny because Tennessee's a really unique place in that you've got metro like Nashville or now Murfreesboro, or you've got way out there in the middle of no place kind of thing, and people will see me out on in person and they'll say, I'll be Tennessean Ya.
Oh, neat.
Yeah, it is.
That is cool.
So it is the thing that they remember.
That's awesome. So this book, you mentioned before the show that you started to write. It was going to be a couple of 100 pages, and now it's 500 pages almost.
438.
There you go.
Yeah, and some of it, a lot of it's life history, and some of it is the fact that I taught in taught karate for 20 years and was a 3-time undefeated Eastern United States fighting champion. I mean, people look at me and
You
say,
know, I never realized that.
Yeah,
I mean, I knew you were into the karate, but
Yeah.
I didn't realize that part.
He's got his black belt on.
Wow.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm a 3rd-degree black belt. I should have 3 of them.
I'm going to stand back.
Yeah, well, I tell people, I said, don't let the gray hair fool you. You know, I'm as nice a person as anybody, but that's in there. There's a chapter about dogs called Dog's Best Friend, which we are, I think. And I love my dogs. I've always loved I love anybody else's dog. I chronicle 27 seasons of guiding in Canada in a wilderness area called the Quetico, or called the Boundary Waters. If you go in through Ely, Minnesota, or if you go in through the northern side through Ontario, it's called the Quetico. It's 3 million square acres with 1 million square acres of water.
Wow.
So it's canoes and campfires, and it was wilderness camping, and just as, I mean, more fun than should be legal. I mean,
Oh,
it was
man.
it was really neat. So there's a bunch of stuff in the book, and we priced it reasonably at Amazon. You can get it for $19.95 or get a personalized copy from me for $25 that kind of covers shipping and handling.
And man, I got the autographed version right here.
Oh, look at you,
and
Don.
I appreciate that personal message you put. And you know, we've been knowing each other since way before the TV show. But you know, we can mark the TV show Tennessee's Wild Side, which started right around 2000.
Yeah.
And boy, there's been a lot of water past the bridge since then.
Well,
hasn't
I
there?
always say with outdoor people, the same faces, different places, because you may be hunting, you may be fishing, and we've known each other since Moby Dick was a minnow. I mean, it was we're getting a little long in the tooth, and it's like I'll be 70 in February, and people, you know, I'll be out there paddling a kayak, and people say, "How old are you?" And I stand up in the kayak, and I've got good balance from the martial arts training.
Yeah.
But boy, kayaking again in Tennessee. I mean, not all boating and fishing took off when the virus hit.
Yeah.
People that hadn't discovered or were rediscovering the outdoors, and you know, I check everything on the website. I think license sales are up 20%.
Yeah.
Oh, they're way up, yeah.
And you love it. I mean, you don't want to see your fishing hole all crowded and covered up, but I always carry baits and stuff in my truck so that if I see somebody that I know is a new fisherman, there's nothing quite like putting a bait in the hand of a kid or somebody who's new. To kind of fire them up and think that they're going to go out there and catch a few fish. And if you ain't catching them in Tennessee, buddy, you ain't catching them, because we got them.
Yeah.
So you talk about, you mentioned the kayak. I see a lot of your social media. You're in a kayak. You're not in that bass boat anymore. What's your favorite right now? I guess kayak. Yeah?
The kayak, I'm kind of committed to the kayak. For one thing, you can get into skinny water.
Yeah.
Places that other people can't
Sure.
get into. The other thing is, the first time I was in a kayak was on Old Hickory Lake fishing a tournament in February. So, I mean, you can. It is what you want to make it. You know, it's a very stable kayak. You dress in wool and wicking clothing, even in the wintertime. Hypothermia is something that we should be thinking about now.
Sure.
And the 50-50-50 rule, I think they call it. If the water's 50 degrees, you're immersed for 50 minutes, you got a 50% chance of survival.
Wow.
So it's something to keep in mind. And, you know, you're supposed to stay in the boat. That's the idea. You know, so don't do anything silly. And I always post and say on my Friday segment of the radio spot, Wild Side Radio, zip up that life jacket. And now I'm saying, you know, put that safety harness in the tree stand. You know, it's fun.
Yep.
And you hate to see something that should be a positive turned into a negative. And so just taking the safety precautions really, really helps.
Yeah,
Definitely.
it sure does.
Well, it's a pretty rig. I've seen, like you said, your post on social media. You got your red, white, and blue kayak and red,
Good
white, and blue
picture of it.
paddles. And
Yeah.
So tell folks what you're catching right now and what you're catching them on.
I'll tell you right now, the bass bite for me is always good. And I don't just fish for bass. I mean, it's what people want to hear about. But the bass bite is good and the crappie bite is good. Really, right now, everything is good. This is a little bait. It's the color is number 584, and it's called Oyster. And it's got that little blue that comes off of a shad. And it's the 1.5, so it will bounce. You get a deflection bite. You throw, if you see a tree or a bridge piling or something. I know people don't want to throw past it and run into it, but that's the trick to getting the bite. This one hasn't been used much. I changed out that front hook to red.
Oh, really?
And I put the same size hook. So this is probably a number 4 hook. And people say, does that make a difference? And I said, if we're in the boat together, I have a standing bet with you. I'll bet you $1 a fish that fish is on the red hook. Red in the fish's world indicates something that's injured. If you look at fish when they're in peril, the blood rushes to their forefront. And it turns really red. So they don't, you can overdo it. Subtle is the trick for big fish. So this brought me a 6-pound fish just a few weeks ago. And we go and catch, on a good day, we catch 15. I'm not a numbers guy. We'll go out there. I'll go out with Debbie, and we'll go out there and see if we can catch. For for us, it's kind of like, what are they biting? So I'll throw this, and then I alter almost everything that I throw. Here's a buzzbait that has a little willow leaf blade on the back of it, and it's blue. I had to get that painted, not hand painted, but spray painted by a guy in Ohio. And then I add this skirt to it, which pulsates, and a buzzbait. Because where we live in the Rock Island area, there's muskie. And if you don't like one of your baits, throw it up there because they'll take it away from you. So if you got a bait that runs sideways, I usually give them to people I don't like. But if you got a bait that runs sideways, you can throw it around there where there's muskie and they'll eat it. But this is a good bait. And smallmouth.
Oh, yeah.
People think this is too big a bait for a smallmouth, and I'm the person that believes that theory of big bait, big fish. I mean, if they have to, it's a return on investment. If they have to move this far to hit a bait or move this far to hit a bait, they're going to pick what's closer.
Yeah.
They almost always are. They expend less energy, and if you don't do that, you get smaller instead of getting bigger or maintaining. So a surface bait, while that water temperature, and the surface water temperature where we are is running about 64, depending on which body of water. And and then I like a jig. I'm a big jig fan.
Oh yeah.
And it could simulate just about anything, but crawfish. And this is a baby rage tail, and this is a full size rage tail. If you're throwing finesse, and we throw a lot of finesse stuff in really clear water, so it might be a little 5-inch worm, or it might be a little finesse jig that weighs a 1/4 ounce or 1/8 of an ounce. I put this on the back, and that color is called watermelon red, good clear water color.
That one. Yeah.
Okeechobee craw, and I'll put that on a bigger jig. And one of the things about people and their jigs is, again, because I alter everything that I've got, I trim these jig skirts, and it really makes a difference because water will compress those little rubber band legs on there. So when you're fishing that jig, when it first comes out of the package, you can see it's pretty much all standard size. And I'm not going to dump this all over the studio, but
you're fine. Go ahead.
If you can see this, what happens is I'll trim some of these little legs. And what it does is when these get compressed, I trim it in what I call a Christmas tree effect. And when you do that, so if it's 3 different lengths, it opens 3 different times. So when it goes to the bottom, instead of just going like this, it will go boom, boom, boom. And it automatically looks alive, and it looks different.
Yeah.
Because if you look at crappie and bass and walleye and all the fish that have big eyes, they feed by sight. So no sight, no bite. If they see and we got a bunch of people fishing, if they see the same thing over and over again, they're going to quit biting. The other thing I do is I'll spread this weed guard. And it's really good to have that weed guard on there, but if you spread this, it makes a softer bite. So when that bass hits that,
Gotcha, yeah.
They don't feel it as much. So I don't remember the name of that, but I like the colors that vary a little bit, and I very rarely will trim the odd color. I leave that on there. But you can see it's got, again, when you just do this, you see it opens up 3 different stages.
That's a good little tip. That's something people may not think about, and flattening that guard out too. That's cool.
It is.
That's awesome. Well, speaking of that buzz bait, I was thinking about that when you were talking about it. Does that catch fish all day long? Is that I've always heard buzz bait's a morning bait and an evening bait.
Well, the funny part about that is because we just said this, and I know that people do things conventionally because they hear it or see it or whatever. And if you're doing conventional, you're going to catch conventional. If you go back and change things up a little bit, there's a reason people catch a lot of big fish at night. Because your cast doesn't have to be as accurate. You can have a big knot and real heavy line and all that because they can't see it as well. My whole point is I'll throw that buzzbait in the middle of the day. And I said, if you have good presentation, you're still going to catch fish. And that's the time they can see the best. So you're more likely to draw their attention. And every bait that you throw has got triggering qualities and attracting qualities. The attracting qualities are large sizes, bright colors, sound, the ability to make sound. So those are attracting qualities. Now, that doesn't seal the deal. The triggering qualities are the ones that do that. Small, easily swallowed shapes, natural colors, natural swimming motions. So when you find that combination, it's the reason that plastic worms have been catching fish for 70 years. Yeah. And 70 years from now, they will. They're silent. They're, again, it's got a great swimming motion. And if you it's kind of like anything else. If you're a bow hunter and you're a fisherman, let the equipment do what it's designed to do, because people want to overwork lures a lot of times. When things get tough, go to slower retrieves and smaller lures, and you'll almost always catch fish. So it's the same thing whether you're a golfer or a baseball player or whatever. You golf by any chance?
I do.
Do you?
I love golf.
You know what golf is, don't you? Mm-hmm. It's for people who don't lie well enough to fish. But when you get out there, regardless of what your sport is, let the equipment do the work. I mean, you can adjust the camera, but there's a right setting for it. Once you get there, leave it alone. So when you start catching fish or you start seeing deer, I don't move my tree stand. I let the deer come to me. And a little scouting, a little pre-work probably helps a lot. So, when you're doing that, and then when you get that experience, the things that that work, as human beings, we can take the things that don't work and we can remove those. It moves us closer to doing everything right the first time. That's the people you want to watch. Those are the people that really know. And you talk to whether it's an old-time farmer or somebody that's been hunting for 60 years or fishing for 50 years or whatever, those guys got to figure it out.
And that's why I follow him on social media. So I see those posts and I try to.
I know. It's inspirational, isn't it?
Exactly. So we haven't touched on rods. Do you throw a bait caster on some of this or a spinning reel? What do you suggest folks out there kayak fishing?
Well, I can tell you, for real fun, what you want to do is, in the kayak, I've got rods staged, and I'll take as many as 5 and as few as 3. And if it's May and the bluegill is spawning, I take 1. I take a fly rod. A fly rod and a sponge spider. You can catch them all day. We did a little video one day. We were on a pond, and you could see those bluegill beds. They're like that honeycomb look, and you catch the bluegill closest to you first so you don't disturb the rest of the nest. And I said, watch this. I'm going to catch one on the first cast, and threw it out there, and you hear that bluegill sound, you go, if you hear that 100 times a day, you'll never forget it. when we get out on the boat for crappie, I like believe this or not, an ultralight rod, and if you can find it in 6 foot, and I know people will laugh at this, I either throw 4-pound or 2-pound test line, and you get a lot more action out of your baits with lighter line. It kind of makes sense that this is 20-pound test, this is 4-pound test. That's going to restrict the action of your line a lot, or of your lure a lot.
Sure.
So I go with lightweight stuff. And if you like braided line, I've been playing with this lately. You put that braided line on your spinning reel, you never get that little twist, and you put a fluorocarbon leader on the front of that.
Okay.
And on the braided line, take a permanent marker. And you don't want to do this on the kitchen table. I've been married before. I can tell you it doesn't work. The braided line, you mark about 3 inches, you leave about 3 inches. And what it does is it camouflages those lines. Those fish are looking up, so they get all the light. Their eyes collect light 5 times better than ours. So if you camouflage that line like that, just mark, and you can do that for about 10 or 12 feet of line. Even the spooky fish don't ever connect that. And then you have that fluorocarbon leader, and fluorocarbon allegedly is invisible and really strong. So, and then I take the bait casters for when you're hunting big fish.
Right.
And I will throw braid for what I call feel baits because, again, braid is no stretch. It's very, very sensitive and pretty strong. And I tie a double knot on that. I'll tie a Palomar knot and close it off with a cinch knot because sometimes it's got that little waxy. So if you pull that down, that's not going to come off. If you tie one knot, it could slip. And you got a great fish story, but no fish. So usually it's 2 bait casters, 1 spinning, 1 ultralight spinning, and that I got to tell you, ultralight. Even if it's you could catch, and we have caught 3 and 4 pound smallmouth on that. If your drag is set right and you're not as good, you can get those fish in, and it's big fun on light tackle. I mean, it's challenging and it really is fun.
So. I'm going to stay on fishing. Go ahead.
Hey, I was just thinking, Joey mentioned getting baits in the hands of newcomers and kids especially, that are fired up about the sport and potentially fired up, and especially if they have some success early on.
Yes.
Tell us about and we ask this of every guest we have, how did you get interested in doing what you're doing now?
Well, for me.
Go back to the beginning.
Okay. I remember when I was a kid, a long time ago, watching.
Not that long ago, right?
Well, I'll be 70 in February. It was a long time ago. I remember watching Bill Dance and some other people on TV, and on Sunday, you could get bowling or a Christian TV show or fishing. When it was Virgil Ward, Bill Dance, Roland Martin, whoever else was out there at the time, and I thought, well, that looks like fun. And then you'd go to a magazine rack and you'd see those pictures of that big bass and that gill shaking and all that. It's like, wow, I'd love to do that. Well, I went fish. I decided I'd go fishing. And nobody in my family fished, and I decided I would go. And so I went to Sears. When Sears was a department store, and I bought a little I didn't know the difference. I bought a fly rod and a fly reel, and the fly reel was 69 cents. I remember that. And the reel is just a place to hold the line.
Right.
And I don't remember how I tied the hook on. And I actually in the middle of, we lived in the city for a lot of years, and then we moved to the county, and there was a little old farm in the middle of this that this guy sold all this property. So he's got a 19-acre farm. It's got 2 farm ponds on it, and the guy was a judge, and this is all in the book. He would run you out of there. How he knew somebody was on there, I have no idea. But he was menacing looking, and he would run you out. And finally, he asked me, was I willing to do a little bit of work there? And I said, yeah, I will. That got me an into fishing the ponds.
Oh, good.
So
Nice.
I fished for a year and never caught a fish. Not every day,
wow.
but I fished for a long time, never caught a fish. So he had a chicken coop, and you go where the chicken, you can make chicken soup out of chicken poop is one of the other one of the other chapters. And I dug up one turn with a pitchfork, and you got enough night crawlers, you could take 62 people fishing.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they're all over, and juicy and smell. So. Well, I went down to one of the little ponds, and I just launched that out with the little float on it. It looks like the kid that would have been wearing overalls if I wasn't a city kid.
Oh, yeah.
At this point, I was just glad I wasn't wearing like orange and turn this way, and hold the number up. But when I got down there, I just kind of, I couldn't cast that thing,
Oh, yeah,
so I just
yeah.
kind of pendulum swung it out to the base of a willow tree.
Like a cane pole kind of thing.
It was. That float went down, and I had never caught a fish. It looked like a tuna fisherman. I pulled that fish up, and it about hit me in the chest and landed on my feet. And I don't know who was more surprised, me or the fish. But it was the first fish I caught, and it was about 2 pounds.
Oh, wow.
And I became the hero of the neighborhood because the people that would sneak in there, we had big-time bass fishermen that had those old tackle boxes that you opened it up, and then you opened it up, and then you opened it up. And those guys would come walking out of there, and I used to say, did you catch any fish? He said, threw everything in the box, never caught a one.
Oh, wow.
So I kind of felt accomplished. But what I realized while I was writing the book was it wasn't about catching the fish. It was about the feeling you got about catching that fish. And so hence we've got 3 vehicles. I carry fishing equipment in all my vehicles, not rods and reels, but baits. And I don't care if we're in a restaurant or on the street, or we were at a launch ramp the other day, one of the TWRA launch ramps, and there was a kid over there who was hunting crawfish and not having a whole lot of luck. And I said, oh, wait. I said, I got crawfish I got some plastic crawfish in here. And you give them a couple of lead heads and show them how to rig this and throw that. And the anticipation for a kid of catching something on that
Yeah.
it never gets old.
Yeah.
And even if they don't, it gives them, to me, it's what you offer people is immediate help and hope for the future. And when you can do that, I don't care if it's charity work or fishing or whatever else it is, that changes somebody's life.
Wow.
I tied on a floating crankbait for my son one time, and I just turned him loose. And I think the patience of a child, just throwing and reeling. He caught a fish on his own. I thought that was pretty cool. What do you suggest for kids if you're going to start a kid out fishing? A crankbait, something easy, I guess. And
I go with single hook baits for one thing, because with the crankbait, somebody's going to be wearing hooks before it's over. I've been
I
hooked.
hear you.
I've been hooked a bunch of times myself. Sometimes I did it myself, but yeah. So I go with single hook baits, and I go. People will laugh when I say this, but that's caught more fish.
Yeah.
A pearl-colored curly tail grub, and in military survival kits, you know what they packed? A pearl-colored curly tail grub.
No kidding.
Yes, and the reason behind that is everything that swims will hit that because it looks like a minnow. They eat more minnows than they do anything else. And if you can make it look like a minnow, for me, like I tell people, if you watch them, spend a little time in the creek and watch them, how they dart and how they. So I say when I throw that out there, and I crank it and stop, and I crank it and stop, and I crank it and stop. You know what I call that? Minnow pause. But you will catch. You will. Yeah. We're here all week.
Yeah.
Well, you will catch more fish doing that, by making it look, because a minnow just swims naturally and nothing bothers it.
Right.
And we're seeing balls of shad that are huge right now. But when they break those away, when they swim and they look like they go into that flight instinct, then they look like the bass will pick those out. It's kind of like the mouse running from the cat. Or if they look like they're injured, their life expectancy went to like minimal seconds. So again, to match those, this is what you get when you open up a package of a bait. And I'm not opposed to that,
Yeah.
but it's a double willow leaf. It's got the little white skirt, and that really is good. That'll work and catch fish. Here's what you get when you fish with me. I clipped off the front blade, so I took the front blade off. So now it's a single blade, so it's a little more weedless, and I had this skirt that pulsates, and it looks a lot like a shad. I'm not saying this won't work, but I'm telling you,
That will.
It's something they've not seen before, and
Yeah.
so altering your baits. Once you buy it, it's yours. You can change it out any way you want to do that. And again, the red hooks on the front, a little dot of red on any bait is a good plan. And again, when you look at the baits that are the most effective, you can go back and say what baits have been around for 50 years. And we talked about this a little bit earlier.
Oh yeah, the jitterbug.
Oh yeah, I mean, when people talk about fishing at night, the first thing I tell them is just go get your black jitterbug. You can when you talk about taking a kid fishing, you throw that out there when it's coming back. It's bloop bloop bloop.
You can't get hung up. It's going to be on top.
The only thing you can do wrong with it is fish it too fast.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's baits that and for the kids, one of the really fun things for me in the spring is throwing a floating worm. So it's rigged weightless and weedless, and there's a little leader on the front. I call it a shock leader. You get a good swivel for the front. You get you about 12 pounds, a 12-pound test line, and you either camouflage the line or you get camouflage line. And put like a 3/0 hook on it, and then you can Texas rig that so it is weedless, and you can throw that around. It's boat docks, lily pads, anything like that. Again, you can't fish it wrong. You can throw it on the little push button reels, and a fish will come up and hit that. And whether you get it to the boat or not, we're such visual creatures that when a kid sees that and knows that it works. Yeah, you look at your watch. You aren't leaving for about 6 hours. When they start to see that happen, and when they put one in the boat. I took my son fishing, was teaching him how to fish a jig. He was 12 years old, and took him to a spot that I was very familiar with, and I knew there was an underwater stump, and he's fishing that. He, like everybody else, had set the hook about 6 times on sticks. So yeah. The sticks, we call them tree pounders.
Yeah.
So when we were fishing, his line starts swimming off. I said, "That's a fish. Set the hook." Well, he had a little old cheap rod and a little old cheap reel. He keeps reeling and reeling and reeling. We scooped that fish up. It was 9.5-pound largemouth.
Oh, gosh.
He won the Sports Afield contest for that year, and this was before replicas, and I said, "It's your fish. We can mount it or put it back. I would prefer you put it back." And of course, as a kid, he said, "No, I want to take it." So we mounted that fish, but that kind of spurs them on to going back. And again, when you do a kindness to a child, I mean, to me, it's like if you go fish with a kid, and even if it's only for 45 minutes and they want to throw rocks in the water and they get hungry and whatever, you're introducing them to something they can do the whole rest of their life.
Yeah.
The hunting part's a little harder. But just as rewarding.
Yeah.
But kids they learn responsibility. They learn gun safety. They learn about nature. When you see a coyote chasing a fawn or something,
Right.
Again, you're getting a natural lesson right there.
Well, Joey, I appreciate it. We've talked a lot of fishing, but real quick, you do like to deer hunt, right?
I do like to deer hunt.
And that's happening right now. You got to stand out?
I've got 2 stands out. I put one out in a shady spot and shade on either side, which isn't good in the winter, but it camouflages you naturally. And then based off of wind direction, so I can go to whichever one I want to go. So I'm not as good a deer hunter, but I'm a little smarter than the average deer.
I tell you what, this has been fun.
Yeah, it sure has been. Joey, thank you for coming in, and we really appreciate it. Taking you a day off the water. I can't believe we got you out of.
Boy, it's a pretty day out there.
I know it.
We still got time.
Yeah, I think it's supposed to be 80 by the end of the day now.
And I appreciate the times you've taken me and my dad out fishing.
I've got pictures of that. It really, it was really good, great memories.
All right. Well, we'll do some more.
Okay.
I think that sounds fun. Maybe we can get on the water and do some of this.
That sounds
I think we
great
should
to me.
arrange that somehow.
Uh-huh.
Well, I guess maybe I'll let you close it out, Joey. What will you be doing?
I'll be Tennessean Ya.
I love it. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for tuning in. Stay connected with TWRA by visiting our website at tnwildlife.org and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Hey, it's all about Tennessee wildlife. It's what we do. Tennessee WildCast will be on the air again next week. We'll see you then.